All right, here we go.
Okay,
This
you're
is
live.
this is the time and place set for the City of Salem Finance Committee meeting. It's 4 o'clock on the 26th of April, 2021. I'm Tom Anderson. I'm the chair. I will just recite the other members of the council and the committee who are here. Councilor Stapleton, Councilor Phillips, and Councilor Gonzalez. And there are staff people here who will identify themselves as we get into the meeting. So the first item we have is the approval of minutes from February 22nd, 2021. It's on pages 2 and 3 of your voluminous meeting agenda. I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I move approval of the minutes.
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? If not, could the I guess it would be Kelly. Could the management analyst one, could you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Member Stapleton,
Aye.
Member Phillips,
Aye.
Member Gonzalez.
Aye.
Chair Anderson.
Aye.
Thank you.
The third item on the agenda is public comment. Is there anyone here from the public who wishes to speak before the Finance Committee?
No one has signed up.
Okay. So now we move on to management update information items. And I'm just going to say we have A, B, and C. And Mr. Barron, I presume you can just kind of wrap those all up in one time. And I had some questions for the CFO prior to the meeting about certain items in the account statement, and ask him to address those specifically along with the other things he wants to address. So take it away, Bob.
Sure, thanks. Just as an orientation, we knew this would be a large agenda, and so we did a couple of things to make the agenda and its backup more navigation friendly. You'll notice that the page numbers on the agenda are in red. If you're looking at this electronically, you can click on any of those page numbers and they have hyperlinks to the page. So instead of scrolling down to page 66, if you click on, let's see, that's the RFP, page 66, it'll take you right there. I thought that might make it a little easier for you. So, and then in the lower left-hand corner of each page, in color, you'll see, because some of the documents have their own page numbers, we put in red at the lower left-hand corner, the packages, page 1 of 281, for example. And so that's what these page numbers on the agenda refer to. So the number 4 has us covering the investment report, also the results of the general obligation bond that we got a rating for, and then we actually got bids for, and then we've since received the money for, and we just want to give you an idea how that all went. It went incredibly well. And then we have the auditor's request for proposal. That's what makes up the bulk of this agenda backup. But the council had decided years ago to kind of make this a one-off policy that the finance department isn't awarding the contract to the auditors, but the city council would award the contract to the for the city auditors based on the finance committee's review and recommendation. So I wasn't in the position to edit that or make it any smaller. I needed to give it to you in its whole, so that I also gave you the RFP so you could see what we asked of them. And then I gave you their whole response. And then we also did our review on finance and provided a recommendation, and I'll cover that. So that's the orientation. We can get right into it.
Excuse me, Mr. Barron, thank you for that explanation. And that was one of my questions. Why do we have over 100 pages of City of Woodburn? Although it was quite interesting to see what they do, but that was because that was part of the RFP. That was the proposal that came back to us. You're supposed
That's
to
right.
show your work at someplace else, like,
That's right.
give us your writing sample in something else. And that's what it was. But also, if you look at pages 63 through, that's it, 63 through 65, that is the policy on the selection of the auditor that the council did, who knows when, some time ago. And that's the policy that Mr. Barron and the people who work for him have been following, which is why we have really good information about Woodburn.
All right, so we'll go right to the finance presentation, the PFM monthly report that gives us a report on the investments. What I try to do is extract, instead of you going through the 40 some odd pages of that investment report, I try to extract out what I think is the pertinent information, the things I look for, number one of which that we're in compliance with our investment policies, the rules you give me for investing our dollars. And then I put that in a presentation, this 6-slide presentation beginning on page 4. I always include on the first page, just to give you an idea of what the US Treasury yield curves are. You know, as investing public monies, we're really restricted in the investment vehicles we can use. The chairman and I were talking about the priorities for the investment of public dollars are always the maintenance of principal, making sure that the dollars are available when they're needed. And then secondarily is maximizing the interest earned on those dollars. So since US Treasuries are one of our biggest investment vehicles, I want you all to see how the short-term and longer-term investments are doing. There was a time last year when I was on this slide showing an inverted yield curve, and that's where there was no confidence in the out years, and so investors were actually paying more for short-term investments, which is exactly opposite what you think. You buy a 6-month CD, you're not going to earn as much as if you buy a 2-year CD. But when you have an inverted investment curve, it's the opposite. And so you could see that we have a normal upward sloping curve in each of the last 4 months, actually for probably the last 10 months. I think it was, yeah, maybe the last year. I think it was January, February last year when it was inverted. There really wasn't much change in April over March, except I did mention that the 10-year and 30-year maturities dipped just a little bit. In the previous month, when I gave you February's, I told you that, hey, higher yields on long-term treasuries means the investors have more confidence in the economic outlook, but it also can be a signal to inflationary expectations in the long term. And so I don't think that small dip in the 10 and 30 years really says too much to us, but it is consistent with what we've been seeing in the last several months. The next slide, Tom asked me to spend a minute on. The next 3 slides have the same total information for each of the last 4 months. The most recent month is March 31st. And the total market value of all 5 portfolios was $403,897,404. So I think the way it's shown, someone could mistakenly add up the columns and see that they don't add up to 100%. But what it's supposed to do is show that, hey, for March 31st, we had a $403 million. And take a look at the row right below it. You'll see that 86 million was cash in the bank at US Bank, and that represents 21.3% of the 403 million. And then
Mr. Barron, I'm sorry to interrupt. What
Sure.
page? I
Oh,
already,
I'm so sorry. 6 of 281?
okay, 6. All right, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yes, yeah, I'm sorry, page 5 of 281, I should have told you that. That's where you saw the upward sloping curves. So, now we're on page 6. So then the LGIP, that is a short-term investment fund operated by the state. The state generally has, the LGIP fund generally has higher interest rates than what we can earn on our own, because they don't have the same limitations that we do on the investment of public funds. And so, so 95 million or 23.7% of the 403 million. And so on, those are the two accounts that are managed by your city staff. And the other three, the general obligation bond portfolio, short-term portfolio, and long-term portfolio in green, are managed by our engaged financial advisor, PFM. And I think what's interesting is you'll see the bond portfolios, they're now representing like about 4% of our portfolio. Last year, they were significantly higher, right? Because we had all that money for the police facility and all the money for the library, but the police has almost all their bills paid, and we're wrapping up the library this year. So there's not that much money left in those anymore. The short-term portfolio captures any, and this was another conversation that the chairman and I had, is that US Bank has to collateralize all of our deposits. So they have limits on how much money we can actually put in the bank. And the LGIP, the state has limits how much we can put in LGIP. It's $51.2 million for each the city and our URA. So 102 million. What do we have?
90 some, 95.
Yeah. So so when we max out our deposits in the liquid vehicles, the bank and the short-term investment fund, we have to put the money somewhere. If we need it within the next year, we put it in the short-term portfolio, and if we don't need it in the first year, we put it in the long-term portfolio. We meet with the project managers of all our major projects every month. And remember, what our goal is making sure that there's money available when it's needed. They tell us when they're going to need the money, and then we invest according to what they tell us. And then bond portfolio money, that's always segregated from every other fund. If we issue a general obligation bond, it goes only into this account until a bill has to be paid. Then we transfer from it into the bank, and then we write the check. So I think the important takeaway from this slide is that the colored numbers are the total market value of all 5 portfolios in each of the last 4 months. And then for each of the months, you can see the breakdown by portfolio in the rows.
Excuse me, Mr. Barron. Let me say that was a very good explanation, but the thing that got me hung up on this is if you're looking at the US Bank, the balance, I was adding all those percentages. They didn't equal to 100. I was adding it vertically, but you added horizontally. So if you go balances on March 31st, if you add US Bank, LGIP, GO bond, short-term, long-term portfolio, that's where it issues 100%.
Right.
And it's the same true all the way across the board. 100% of our funds, and they're different because at different times we have to spend down money in certain accounts, and at different times we get money like marijuana tax money or property tax money, and that is what fluctuates. Not so much the fact that we're out there earning less interest or more interest. It's really what we earn is pretty well fixed, but it's what comes into us or what we have to pay out that moves the accounts up and down.
And that's such a great point. Is the bond portfolio is going to go up by what we earn, but go down. That's the principal movement in the bond portfolio by what we're spending. But the other portfolios are going to depend on when we receive the revenues. 50% of our revenue comes in by property taxes. And as you know, that those of you that pay property taxes, that comes in November, and some of it, a good portion in December. We have over 90% of our receipts in those 2 months. But then all of those dollars are spent down until we receive 12 months later, money coming back in November again. So you'll see a decline. The next slide, page 7 of 281, shows those same 4 months balances. Here we, on the top chart, we show what the weighted average maturities are for the combined 5 portfolios. And it also shows the sector distribution, which is what investment vehicles we're putting our money into and how they relate to the policy, the restrictions that our policies put on us. The lower level you'll see on the far right side is the policy says we could put 100% of our money in treasuries or federal agencies or cash, right, collateralized deposits, because those are zero risk, are as low as risk as possible. But we do have a limit of 10% of our total portfolio that can be in municipal obligations, and 35% that we can invest in corporate obligations. So this is to demonstrate, yes, we're well within our investment policy. Let's see, and then the next slide, I throw this one in here because I find it interesting. The previous 2 slides have shown you the securities market value that includes the interest that we've been already. But some of our investments, let's say we only get paid in June and December. Well, since December, we've earned interest. It just hasn't been paid yet, right? It won't be paid until June. So I want to let you know that how much interest has been accrued. So in addition to the security market value on page 8 of 281 of $403 million, we've actually earned another $855,000 worth of interest. It just hasn't been paid to us yet. So I thought that would also be interesting for you to see. And then the next 40 some odd pages are the detail of what I summarized in those few short slides. If there are no questions on the investment report, it's very similar to what I show every month, but I'm happy to answer any questions. But we do have a couple other items that'll take some time that I'd like to get to if you're ready for me to go to the next agenda item.
Does anyone have any questions about this detailed report? I can see Councilor Phillips and Councilor Stapleton. I can't see Councilor Gonzalez, but if you got any questions, speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay, move on, Bob.
Great. So we had a great issue. I think I summarized it. I mean, as soon as we got the bids in,
this is with respect to the audit RFP for the auditor.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
this is the general obligation refunding, which is like
okay, got it.
Financing of the 2012 and 2013 notes.
You explained that last meeting to us very well. It's like refinancing your house. You take advantage of the difference in rates. Okay.
Exactly. And so for this, let's do it in order. Before we went out to market, we had to get a bond rating, right? And if you click on report, we actually have the press release. I thought you'd be interested in seeing that. But the full report is page 54 through 61. If you click on that on the agenda, it'll hop right to it. There's a couple of things that I just wanted to highlight in the full report, and it's all on the first page, that page 54 of 281. In the summary, I think it's important that that I think it's something we all can take pride in, is that the second sentence says, although the coronavirus pandemic negatively affected employment and general economic activity and socioeconomic measures are slightly below average, the city's financial profile remains healthy, supported by a strong management team with conservative budgeting practices. I think this committee is responsible for that, is that you give us the ability to march forward with conservative budgeting practices, to maintain that fixed fiscal stability. So when I go before the rating agencies, I can show a trend of being at what we budgeted or a little better than what we budgeted. If I had to go before them and show how we were missing our budgets year after year, we would not be believed when we're forecasting out into the future. But we've been able to demonstrate every time I've gone before the rating agency, this fact that we have strong management, we have forecasting tools that we use, and we have conservative budgeting practices.
Excuse me, Bob. Virginia has a question.
Sure.
So I have a quick question here. So what you just said is what I've heard and what I've believed. And so then I go to hear about the American Rescue Plan, and there's all of this money set aside, the majority of the money set aside, with kind of the understanding that things aren't okay and we need to infuse this cash into the city budget. So can you help me kind of untangle that knot? Because I trust both sources that this is coming from. It just seems like it's conflicting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, let's see. Well, what did it say? It says it says our financial profile remains healthy. 2 years ago, I think what that's saying is that 2 years ago, I had to explain to them why we had consumed several $1 million in each of three audited years, and we were forecasting a fourth year where we were consuming fund balance in our general fund.
That means going below the reserves that we have set, correct?
Actually, no, it's
Okay.
actually our consumption. We had $28 million worth of reserves, and we were forecasting going down to like 18 million. So in 4 years, we were showing like a big drop. This was when I was presenting to them. It's not exactly what happened, but 3 years audited did happen. We actually just spent more than we brought in. And so the rating agencies don't mind if you use your reserve when you need it, because that's what it's there for, right? But you have to have a plan to restore it. How I was able to assuage their concerns is I told them at the time we had 2 revenue measures being considered. One was an operations fee, and one was an employee paid payroll tax. So what they were able to see when I was before them this year is that, yes, we had consumed our fund balance for these 4 years in a row, but in the very next year, we no longer spent more than we brought in because we adopted the operations fee. And so I think that's one of the things you're talking about, stability. Another thing is that the coronavirus or CRF, coronavirus relief shoot, what is yes? CRS, CRP?
We know what you're talking
That
about.
would be, yeah, that would not come out right. CRF.
CRF, Farmer Buyers Relief Funds.
Yes, that's right. CRF, that's what it was. We received $7.2 million. So that covered a lot of expenditures, which meant that we didn't have such a big financial hit as a result of the coronavirus. The American Rescue Plan is covering some of the same categories as the CRF, but it's allowing us to replace revenues that were lost as a result of the coronavirus. But I think the rating agencies are speaking to the fact that we had ample reserves to cover it. Our management of the grants were good. We were on top of it, and we maximized the amount of reimbursement we could get. And we demonstrated that after 4 years of using fund balance, we knew that we needed a revenue initiative to replace it, and we did, where we weren't spending more than we were bringing in. I think that's what they speak to when they say our financial profile is healthy.
Well, if I could speak, I'm not sure you answered all of Virginia's questions, so I'm going to give you my take on it, because her question was, hey, we're solid, we got this operating fee, everything's fine, but we're getting all this money, from various acronyms related to coronavirus and pandemic, and we're saying, man, we gotta use this money. And how does that balance with the other half of that? What you show the bonding companies and everybody else that we're doing great, our bonding companies, the rating companies. Now, here is my answer, okay? And this is what I get, not from you and your answer now, but from the city manager. My answer is, we lost a lot of revenue because of the pandemic. For various and sundry reasons. And so the money we're getting because of the pandemic is going to be used to help replace that revenue to fill the budget gaps. Is that right, or is that totally wrong?
No, I think that's absolutely correct.
Does that answer your question, Virginia?
It does. Thank
Okay.
both of you helped answer my question. Thank
Okay.
you.
Great. And so just another thing I want to point out on this page is they talk about factors that could lead to an upgrade. Frankly, I don't know if like substantial improvement in the socioeconomic measures of the city and a material improvement in the city's reserve and liquidity positions. So our policy is 15% of revenues in our general fund. And we are at that or slightly above now with all this reimbursement money coming in. But our forecast is to be just right at it. And if we continue on the path going, we'll drop below that reserve, that 15% reserve limit. And so they're saying we can get an upgrade if we have a material improvement in those reserves levels. And the opposite is true. What may be considered for a downgrade. And remember, when you get a downgrade in your rating, your cost of borrowing goes up. So your expenses go up. And so would be as that if we don't, like when I was explaining those 4 years of consumption of fund balance, but we had a plan to restore it. If we don't ever have a plan to restore our inadequate, our fiscally responsible fund balance, then that can lead to a downgrade. So then that is the report. And I think I'm going to just scroll instead of use the links. So let me take you to page 62. So we got our AA2 bond rating reaffirmed. And so then we went to market. And you can see that, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12 people responded. Actually, 13 firms had registered, but only 12 put in bids. I blocked out the company's names. Honestly, I'm going to have to look into it, but I think I have to keep their bids confidential because that I don't think they want their competitors to know where they were at a mark, what they were bidding on bonds at any given time. So what I did is just an abundance of caution is that I whited those out, but I showed you the true interest cost for all of the bids. And the winning bid was Morgan Stanley and Company at 0.28%. So can you imagine borrowing $25.5 million over the next almost 6 years, 5.5 years, and being charged just a little over 0.25%? I mean, this was incredible. Not only, as a matter of fact, I think what I put in my email to you is just 2 weeks before that, when the municipal advisor went out and they were trying to estimate what the savings would be, is that they were coming up with 0.6%, just a little over 0.5%. And we got half of that amount at 0.28. So she said that she thought, and I think I put this in my email to you as well, that the reason we did so well was because we hit the market at the right time. There was a lot of buyers looking for AA paper and at these maturities, and they were really competitive. And they said also because of the strong management team. And so I think, let's see, something about confidence in the city of Salem's debt. Anyway, I was flabbergasted. Not that it makes a lot of difference, but I think I told a few of you that typically when you're looking at a deal like this, an underwriter, not only was the rate great, but the closing costs, as it were really low. A lot of times an underwriter will pay itself like $4 a bond. If the bonds are in $1,000 increments, you got $25,555 dollars are bonds, and it would be close to $100,000 worth of an underwriter's fee, or the underwriter's takedown, it's called. Instead of that $100,000 fee, we were charged $6,800. The underwriter's takedown was like 28 cents. So it was the thinnest deal in 14 years of doing this that I've ever seen. So I think we hit the market just right, and we were really fortunate, and we saved the taxpayers. I think we saved the taxpayers $1.7 million rather than the $1.4 million that when I came to you last month and asked your permission to do this, that was the estimate, but we ended up saving even a lot more money.
Well, I have to say, you've given me a new phrase now, thinnest deal. I'll try to throw that into my conversation at some point. That's the thinnest deal. And go ahead, Trevor.
I heard what you said, but go ahead and repeat it, Mr. Barron. How much money did we save the taxpayers with this refi?
$1.7 million.
For a third time. This time I'll be quiet.
$1.7 million over the next 5.5 years. Yeah.
And I'm sure you understand this, Trevor, but I will just say this again. It's not that money shows up in our budget someplace. It's that we don't have to pay it when we're with respect to the bonds.
Right. When you get your property tax bill, there's a line for how much is supporting the bond issues. And so those bond issue costs have gone down now because the debt service on the bonds are $1.7 million less. Those are present value dollars. That's not saying the savings in each of the next 7 or 5.5 years. That is the savings discounted to today's dollars. Today's dollar savings of $1.7 million. So
Well,
that was fun. That was,
yeah, I got to say, well done.
yeah, thanks.
It sounds like it's a very reasonable request, and it was even better than you hoped. So
Yeah,
very well
right.
done.
So if it's okay, the next item is the review of the auditor request for proposal. And you'll see the policy that governs this process, Council Policy number C4, begins on page 63. But if you go to page, in my red page 63, but if you go to page 65, you'll see in items 1 and 2 what the directives are. Items 1 says the city council shall award the contract for the city's auditors to provide auditing services. And then number 2 says the joint finance committee of the city of Salem and the URA shall serve as the request for proposal review committee. So that's you, and that's what tonight is all about. So we sent you the full RFP, what we asked of the respondents. We sent you the response, and it came from the auditor that we had for the last 5 years. There's a couple of things that I just want to let you know that we did. There was a review committee. It was myself, the acting chief accountant, and one of his senior accounting analysts. We reviewed it. We recommended it. We see no problems with continuing with this audit firm. They're very good at what they do. And then the price they asked for was less than or right at a cost of living increase. I think it was less than 1.5% increase over what they charged us last year. And so it was a completely reasonable response. But what I wanted to come to you is why we're recommending this firm when we only had one response. I mean, because you may ask me, well, Bob, why didn't you go back out? And so I want to share my screen and show you host disabled participant screen sharing. Kelly, can you let me share my screen?
Either myself or Bria should be able to do that. Allow.
You should be able to do that, no problem. If you just select the green share screen icon at the bottom of your Zoom application.
No, that's what I did. And it says host disabled participant screen sharing.
1 second, please.
Like orange triangle with a white X.
Somebody decided they didn't want you to say anything about this.
That's right. All right. Okay, try it again.
Okay. Great. Okay, now let me
Sorry
find it. So this is the first thing that I want to show you. I'll give it a second for it to pop up.
We got it.
Okay, great. So I've done this. I did a survey. I'm on weekly calls with a lot of my peers across the state, and so what I wanted to do is I wanted to take like-sized communities. So I took all of these cities that had populations of 50,000 or more. Of course, we're significantly higher than that, but I wanted to see who their auditors are. And as you can see, of the 12 cities in Oregon with populations of our 50,000 or greater, there's only a few firms that actually service all of us. You'll see the names repeated several times here. And so then another thing I would like to share, let's see if I can close this, is one other item, and it was, so I wanted to get an idea is if I went back out, whether I would get anybody to respond. So I had our purchasing manager reach out to those firms that had downloaded the RFP but chose not to reply, and to get an idea of what their reasons for. And as you could see here is the top one said they didn't think they had the resources available at the current time to win the audit. The next one said their travel costs to get into Salem would make their pricing too high. One person said they downloaded it by accident.
That would lead me to say you would never want them to do anything for you.
But I thought it was interesting. The Talbot response said they took into consideration the longevity of our relationship with the current provider, the cost of preparing the response, and the likelihood that their pricing would make them a winning bidder. And so they chose not to. I'm sorry that we didn't get a response from Moss Adams, because they served like 2 or 3 of the cities with populations over 50,000. But I think with that additional research, knowing that we have a capable, competent firm, that their pricing requests, they didn't gouge us with their pricing, and the fact that the other firms from a very limited pool made a conscious choice not to bid, I didn't think we would get a different response if we went back out. So our recommendation to you is that our recommendation to you is that you make a recommendation to the full council to award a 5-year contract to this firm. And for some reason, your name just slipped.
Okay. Swank, Mueller, et cetera. Now, my question, Grove, Mueller, and Swank.
Grove, Mueller, Swank, you're right.
Before I entertain a motion, do any of the counselors have any questions for Mr. Barron concerning this whole process? And I see Dr. Phillips has raised his hand.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's already been spoken to, but just to ask it a different way, I assume that this still meets the criteria for whatever competitive process was needed when this was shopped out originally.
Yes, this is a professional services contract, which is a little different than like a commodity contract where low cost would be the driver. And so in addition to being a different animal, it's a bit of a unicorn, I think Dan Atchison said, in that it kind of circumvents the normal purchasing process because the city council that awards the contract. And so it has fulfilled all of the, yeah, I'm sorry, Dan.
I just wanted to add some context. This was actually changed at the request of Mayor Peterson about 2013, 2014. And she wanted to really kind of pound home the point that this city auditor reports to the city council, your auditor. And she felt that that change in our rules from making the staff basically the awarder of this contract to council, you would have more of an input into who got chosen and to understand that the auditor's role is to report to you, not so much to staff on the city's finances and how our audit comes out.
Perfect.
Thanks, Dan.
So Tom, before you Mr. Chairman, call for a vote, we're still in the information. So if we're willing to conclude the information presentation, we can then go to the action item.
That's what I was moving toward when I said before we entertain a motion. Any other questions in the information section? Does anyone have any other questions under agenda item 4.C? We now move. Oh, you have a question.
No, I was just going to say that I had the question that Bob already, why didn't we go out again if it was just the one response?
Okay.
So thank you for being so thorough and anticipating our questions. You're getting to know us very well. That's kind of scary. How many meetings have we had?
Yeah, well, that's partly why he and I had a conversation earlier today say, here's where I see we're gonna have some, not issues, but we will have some questions and want some further discussion. So,
I guess I have more, just more comments. I mean, I appreciate the recommendation that you're making, and I don't think I'd have any problem supporting, what I sense is an upcoming motion. But I just want to verify that this seems to, what I'm hearing you tell us, Mr. Barron, is that this seems to track, and it's a strong bid, and this is a good entity that we have a history of working with. And I think I heard you say that the increase was approximately like 1.5% in terms of cost compared to last year.
Yeah, I think it actually, is Jeremy on here? I think I wanted to verify it. He pulled it up. I really think it was 1.3, but because I couldn't remember the exact number, I said less than 1.5%. Yes. So it's tracking. All they did is ask for cost of living, essentially. So
I have no personal experience in auditing other than my wife used to be an auditor, and she worked for a bit as a staff person for the American, the AICPA, the American.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So I recognize the professional societies that the applicant were all part of. So I know a little bit about that world, but not in any like meaningful way.
well, as Dan indicated, this is a personal service contract given by, and Bob did the same thing, given by the city council. And part of the reason it is we have a little more discretion here because we have developed a relationship with Grove, Mueller, and Swank over the years. And I know I was the chair, and I think you were all on this when they last came and did their report of our audit, which was a couple meetings ago. And I thought it was a very good job, very thorough job. And, so I have confidence, one, and my main confidence is with Mr. Barron and his staff. And they've gone through this, and then I have seen who they selected before, and I was confident in the way she presented this stuff. So
Kathy Wilson is the lead, the lead for us, and I think she's very sharp. So
are there any other questions for Mr. Barron or Mr. Atchison or anybody who may be on this conference call or Zoom meeting?
Yeah, I do have a question.
Okay, Jose.
Thank you. This was sort of like going back to the letter from Moody's. What are those socioeconomic concerns? What are the factors they're looking at? Can you name a few particularly for Salem?
Yeah. The employment statistics, what types of jobs are available, the salaries that those jobs pay. They also look at the diversity of jobs. They're really concerned if there's one or two employers that represent 80% of the employment opportunities. So those are some of them. Honestly, I was told when I first got here, my first 12 years in public sector, 8 of those, I worked for a AAA rated community. And when I came here, I thought we had very sound financials, but when I talked with the rating agency, they said their primary reason that we are not a AAA is because the state's restriction on our #1 revenue source, and that's property taxes, is that our expenses can go up 4 and 5%, but our property taxes are limited to a 3% cap. Now in Connecticut, I didn't have that cap. And so hopefully that'll give you an idea. Even if we got more employers with better paying jobs, even if that socioeconomic, those considerations were better, I still don't think we'd qualify for a AAA because we don't guide our own future. We can't raise the taxes at will. We're capped on what we can, and they consider that a risk.
Great answer. Thanks so much.
Sure.
So hearing no other questions, I'm going to, on the information items, I moved the agenda to 5.A, a recommendation to the city council that we continue our audit firm that we have used in the past few years. Who'd like to make that motion? And Jose, you're on my screen,
Okay, so moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion?
If I can add something, I'm sorry, Chair
Sure.
Anderson.
No, that's fine. That's why
this is
you're
coming-
here.
Coming from our purchasing attorney, Brian, and he wanted just to make sure to note that because you are acting as the RFP committee, that the committee members have had an opportunity to review the application and reviewed staff's recommendation, which includes the scoring, and to ensure that the actual bidder, in this case Swank, is a responsive bidder.
Okay, and so would you be willing to incorporate that into your motion, Councilor Gonzalez, that we did all the things that Attorney Atchison wants to make sure that we have done?
That's right, I do.
Okay, and second, same?
Yep.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on the motion before the committee, subcommittee? Hearing none, could we call the roll, please?
Member Stapleton,
Aye.
Member Phillips,
Aye.
Member Gonzalez.
Aye.
Chair Anderson.
Aye.
Thank you.
Number 6 then, and so will this be on the agenda, the council agenda tonight, or will it be some
No.
other time? It'll be,
You know what, since we didn't have to award, sometimes we'll do that. If we
right.
expect your approval, we'll put it on the agenda. But I just didn't want to chance it. So
We're
first meeting in May.
we're such a volatile committee. That was probably a good choice.
No, I just want to be careful. So thank you.
Let's, now the next thing is continued business, and I don't know that we have any. If not, I have just, well, do we have any continued business?
I have a couple items on new
Okay.
business, but some of the things we've talked about.
Yeah, well, wait a minute, that's new business. I'm asking about continued business,
No,
something
no
that we have
continued.
discussed in the past that we need to continue to discuss now. Okay, we'll move to number 7 and new business. And go ahead, Mr. Barron, you had a few items, and I think you were saying some that you and I have discussed, and then I may have a few extra ones.
Sure. Some of you may have been aware that last year I brought before the Finance Committee in January of 2020 the idea of a maintenance bond. In the past, what we've done is that if we've needed money to build a police facility, we went to the voters and got approval for $60 million to build the police facility. Or if we wanted to do the renovations to the library, we went to the voters and asked for that amount of money. But the idea came to me when I read a GFOA article on how Denver had done a $1 billion bond issue, and they won an award for the engagement with the public, and how the city county got approval for close to $1 billion to address 600 some odd projects within the city and the county to address some long overdue infrastructure repairs. And so I started looking into it. Now, Oregon law is a little different. We have to be a little more specific on what we're going to do. But I ran it by our municipal advisor and our bond counsel. And then I found an Oregon example. In Portland, they issued $465 million is my recollection. But the next month, I'll bring the full proposal to you, where they had 4 different categories of spending they were going to do. The idea is that we have $2 billion worth of infrastructure assets that needs constant improvements. And the idea that we go before the voters on a one-off type of request isn't a really responsible way to ensure that we maintain this $2 billion infrastructure. So I noticed that a number of the bonding rates are going to fall off in the next, like in year 3. So at the conclusion of 2 years from now. And so what we did is we calculated, what if we went before the voters and kept the amount that they're currently investing in the bonded projects flat? So they would not see an increase on their property bill. Now, truth be told, and we're not hiding anything from anybody, they wouldn't see the decrease because of the ending of some of these bonding initiatives. But if we told them, say, hey, how much could we get done if we committed to you, we would keep your investment in the bondable projects flat for the next 10 years. What could we do? At the time, it was a little over $200 million, $250 million or so. Now, some things have changed over the last years. This refunding, for one thing, you know, I mean, we've saved some money. So what we're doing is the city manager asked me to meet with the president of the council and Chairman Anderson and the mayor, and to see if this is something we would like to bring before this committee again. We put it on hold last year because coronavirus hit us in March, and we didn't think we were going to go before the voters to ask for anything during the pandemic. But we do think it's a very fiscally responsible thing to do. I think it's a lot easier to get someone to say, yes, you're going to not increase my bill, at least for the bondable projects, for 10 years. It's a lot easier for them to, and we're going to get over $200 million worth of investment in our community. I think it's a lot easier for them to check yes for a proposal like that than to say we want to increase your taxes at any given time over the next 10 years.
If I could.
Sure.
Go ahead, Bob.
That's it. So that's the concept. But what I needed to do is I needed to update my forecast of how many millions that we can invest. I went back to each of the department heads that gave me projections on the projects that they would like to get done, and they're updating those lists. There was a third thing. Oh, and then I also want to share with you what Denver had received the award for is the engagement of the community. Because what our goal would be is to get your recommendation to the council to consider this, the council's vote to say, yes, go ahead. And then we'll have, if it's November of 2022, we'll have like 18 months to engage the public and to get their ideas on what they would like to have done to the city's infrastructure over the next decade. And so that's something we would like to bring before you. In conjunction with that, Chairman Anderson asked me to discuss some of the, just to review us, some of the revenue initiatives that were talked about the last time we took a look at it, why we can do some things and we can't do others, and some potential for increases in the upcoming year, just so the Finance Committee will be aware of what opportunity is out there. So I'm calling it the maintenance bond because that's essentially what we're doing, is we're maintaining our infrastructure. And so the maintenance bond will probably take a good portion of our hour. But if we have to move the revenue discussion till the following month, we will, because we really want to get your thumbs up before we proceed, and certainly before we engage the public.
Thank you, Mr. Barron. A couple comments on the maintenance bond. And this makes common sense, but it also grew out of the discussion with the mayor, the council president, me, and Mr. Barron and the manager. One of the problems with issuing bonds for one-time things, when the bond drops off, the rate goes down, and then you have to come back a couple years later and to hike the rate back up. So it's the yo-yo effect that often causes problems with the public.
Voter fatigue, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the second part of that is if the rate is X per $1,000 of value, and we're going back again we're renewing that amount, not making it 2X, we're just continuing at X dollars per value. And that's where we need to educate the public. And that's the 18 months that Mr. Barron talked about will give us that opportunity because there's two good points. Nothing's going up and you're getting all this bang for your buck. The second thing with respect to the revenue, and I want to say from the get-go that this we need to look at this through an equity lens and a climate change lens. And the ones that specifically come into mind are if we want to talk about a gas tax, and gas tax can only be used for transportation related matters, but pedestrian sidewalks are within the ambit of transportation from a gas tax, as are street crossings and all the other things that help pedestrians. But of course, you've got to look at this through an equity lens and a climate action lens. The climate action lens is kind of good if there's a tax on gas. Maybe it'll make people drive less, and that has less greenhouse gas emissions. But also, if there's a tax on gas, it's a regressive tax, and it affects those people at the bottom end of the economic scale, who are often people of color. And we don't want to do that. So I've asked Mr. Barron to kind of look at, is there some way we could have some sort of, like we have a utility fee or a utility fund, and could there be some way where there could be some sort of rebate on this? The other one I've asked him to look at again is the business license fee, again with the same sort of equity lens on it too. That is not a climate action thing, but it's still an equity lens. How is this going to affect the mom and pop businesses? And do we need to have some exemption for certain businesses that earn less than a certain amount per year? And do we want to have it a progressive tax where license fee might be more on the bigger companies? And these are all the things that we'll be discussing, if not in the next month, in the following month after that. And I think Councilor Gonzalez and I are on the Climate Action Task Force, and I think all these things have to kind of mesh, and so we'll know more in the next few months.
Cool.
Does anybody else on the committee, or Mr. Barron, anything else you want to tell us?
No, that's
Okay,
it.
I see Councilor Phillips is raising his hand. What's up?
I'm sure we'll learn more about this in the future, but my first questions are, this sounds like a very interesting concept that's being proposed. But I've heard that we're going to go out or may go out for a bond request, like related to updating like the fire trucks. So I guess my question is, what impact would this maintenance bond have on other expected bonds that were like in the pipeline? So beyond the fire trucks, which is a thing, and I'm sure it's bigger than just the fire trucks, there was also the idea, and this may be opening up a totally another topic, but our city hall is not new, and at some point, needs to be either dramatically updated or just rebuilt. How does that factor in? Those would be my big questions.
Yeah, I believe that the chief is willing to add his, I think it's $20 million for the apparatus, $3 million for the equipment, the miscellaneous add-ons and old equipment. And then at one point he had $7 million for stations. So he at various times, he's had a 20, 23, or $30 million request. He has impressed everybody with the urgency of it. And I would prefer the chief to speak for himself, but the most recent information that I have when we've gathered is I believe he's willing to wait if we're willing to go through the 18-month process and get it on the November ballot. He says the risk is he believes that a standalone fire truck bond would get passed with much greater probability than a maintenance bond that is really large. Because people understand that we need fire trucks, and these fire trucks are at the end of their useful life. However, the last meeting we had, he said, it really doesn't make sense for me to go out and then to immediately go out and ask for the maintenance bond. He says, I believe I can keep the equipment running up until we issue debt. So what would happen is we would get the appropriation authority from the voters to issue bonds over the 10 years. I wouldn't issue $250 million worth of bonds in year one. I would make issues throughout the 10 years, whereas the debt service payment would keep that bond levy tax rate the same on everybody's property bills for 10 years. But the fire trucks would be in the very first year's purchase.
Yeah.
When I went out for debt, he would be up number one. So that's the latest I understand. We'll have more on that next month.
If that is very helpful, because what you're really saying is the fire equipment, fire bond would be included in this maintenance bond that would keep the level the same, which is again a matter of public information. You're not paying any more, and the first thing you're going to get is new fire trucks, et cetera. Now I got a second question, and it's related to Councilor Gonzalez. Was that Armani?
Yeah, you remember him, Tom? That's him.
Yeah. Okay, cool. He's a lot bigger than the last time I saw him. That happens to kids. They just keep growing. Trevor has the same thing.
Armani and I walked for Tom years ago. So
yeah. Great.
Yeah, he had a different hairdo then. It was kind of spiky, if I recall. Yeah. All right. Are any other things, questions that anybody has? Trevor, I don't know. You're getting close to your limit
It's
here.
a follow-up. I didn't hear about City Hall. So is there any, like, where's City Hall in that?
Yes. You know what? I wish I would have had it on one of my other screens, but there is there's like 5 major categories of repair, from streets and bridges to city-owned properties, facility repairs to fleet. Yes, it is absolutely one of the investments that are necessary. Now, don't forget that you didn't just approve for us to go forward with this customer service center and that internal borrowing that we did. It was $950 some odd thousand that we're spending to create a customer service center on the first floor. We're also going to be moving court from the second floor down into the vacated police. We also had to replace the generators and improve the elevators. So that money's already been appropriated. So you're right. I think they just did the roof on the council chambers, but it needs so much more money, but we're doing our best to define those projects. And we'll give a preliminary list to you next month. But understand, the whole purpose of community engagement is to find out what the taxpayers that have to vote yes on it want from us too. And so that list we fully expect to change by the time it gets to the voters in November of 2022.
I have a quick question, Tom.
Go ahead.
Or chair, sorry. So yes, I would love to see that list, which you're talking about, what kind of staff is thinking about. And just, right off the top of my head, there's gonna have to be a lot of things on there that people, that are tangible for people, right? If we don't have sidewalks on that list, there's probably gonna be hell to pay. So just the tangible things that, I like to say the little things that make a big difference in people's lives. And I don't know what Parks and Recs look like, or if another library in a different section of town is going to be something that's on the list. But I know those are things that you're going to hear from the voters. So I would love to see the preliminary list from staff. And I would also love to see, I don't know how, maybe you could get to us a summary of what this town did that got the awards for public engagement. What were kind of some of the things that they did to really connect with with the voters?
Absolutely. I wanted to bring that before you because I think you'll be impressed. They have recommendations on who the steering committee should be and how they reached out and process. I read it now. It was over a year ago that I reviewed it in any detail, but I want to review it again and package it for you. So a nice a bit of information to review for next month.
And all of this will be, that is the maintenance bond and that sort of plan will be what we will be discussing the next meeting. It would probably be the meeting after that we would be discussing alternative sources of revenue.
Right. Thank you.
Just one comment.
We're fortunate. We're running over by about 15 minutes today. And a lot of times we moved the meeting to 4 o'clock because we were jamming you up against all those executive sessions that you seem to have every month for the last several months. But tonight I was fortunate to get an extra 15 minutes from you guys, but thanks for that, Chair.
It's going to take a little longer because Councilor Gonzalez has a question too.
No, it was just really just to, I'm in support of that maintenance bond. My aunt that came from Mexico years ago, and this is my wealthy aunt. When she said, what surprised me the most about this city were the beautiful roads, how smooth they were, right? Because of where she's at. In where she's at, so yeah, we need to maintain, we need more infrastructure, we need to do whatever we can. I see this as just such a great way to engage our neighborhood associations. I mean, we go back and talk to them and they'll find those projects that Virginia mentioned. But I think taking into account what Trevor said, as far as other things that may be coming up, other bond, not just from the city of Salem, but other ones that may come up in November of 2022. Just keeping that in mind.
Yeah. In fact, we have done it in the past, and I can't remember exactly what, but there was one time where we deferred our bond because some other bond, a school district bond or something else.
School district, right?
Yeah. But so it's their turn to defer to us this time.
And the big selling point is we're not asking to raise anybody's tax.
Exactly right. Any further discussion? Well, then we will pretty much see each other again in about a half an hour, 40 minutes, everybody. I'll miss you in that interim. Okay.
Thank you all very much.
I am adjourning the meeting now.